Employers of Reddit, what was the worst way a candidate messed up a job interview with your company? Had an interviewee show up 10 minutes late to an interview, tell us our clock was wrong and proceed to take it off the wall and adjust it. After he left, of course we adjusted it back to the actual time. Pretty sure that guy was trying to establish an alibi. A colleague of mine called this guy in for an interview. He didn't show, and about 2 hours after he was due in, he called and said he'd been hit by a car. Colleague decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and they arranged another day. The day arrives and he didn't turn up again. We got a call from him a while later saying he'd broken his tooth on an almond and couldn't come as he'd had to rush to a dentist. My incredibly trusting colleague decided to try one more time another day. The guy turned up drunk. I mean, at least his drunkenness explains how he got hit by the car and broke his tooth on an almond. 20-something chick with an impressive looking resume, but then she showed up with her mom in tow and actually expected mom to come into the interview. I guess mom wrote the resume, so she felt she should do the talking. Resume included a startup he founded. I asked about it. Tell me about your startup. Sorry, what was it called again? He forgot. He forgot the freaking name of the startup he founded a year prior. It went downhill from there. Okay, maybe my memory isn't so bad. Proceeded to respond to the program manager's question of what would you do if you had a conflict with another coworker, with an extremely long anecdote about how he worked with this guy who got his girlfriend at the time pregnant, and he had to see this guy every day at work and resist beating his butt. The program manager was staring at him and went, oh, and then he felt the need to say, I got him outside of work, but I never touched him at work. Right, there is a guy who prioritizes work over personal commitments. Would have been a good hire. I was friends with the hiring supervisor at a job once, who told me this one guy dropped a bag of methamphetamine while taking something else out of his pocket at an interview. He actually could have gotten away with this, as the interviewer is something like 80% blind. However, he said, oh, sorry, to which the interviewer replied, for what? His answer? I dropped my M. I worked as a supervisor at an ambulance company about 5 years ago. We had crazy turnover, so we were constantly hiring new EMTs to fill open spots on the schedule. One of my many duties was to assist with the hiring process 2-3 days a week. The hiring process was, come to the main office, HQ, take a written test, take a skills test, simulation, panel interview, HR and ops supervisor. Note, as an EMT on the ambulance, you should know how to map yourself and get to an address without much issue, especially when given an email with a literal map to the location on it. So this candidate, we'll call her Ding Dong Diana or DDD, calls our dispatch about 30 minutes before her set appointment time and was extremely flustered. She has no idea where she was and the dispatch supervisor was trying to keep her cool while doing her best to navigate her based on very vague description of her location. I'm by a fast food place and a gas station. No street names or even a city. Full stop. I get paged over to dispatch and the supervisor fills me in. I've never met this candidate before, so without introducing myself, I take over the call. Me. Hi, I was told you're a little turned around. I'm going to try and DDD, excuse me, I'm lost and I'm running late for my appointment. I don't have time for this. Me. Don't worry, I've alerted the interviewing team that you're running a bit behind and DDD, it's not my fault. You guys didn't give me the right directions. I'm not from here. How am I supposed to know where I'm going? Me. Were you given an address? DDD. Yes. 123 address Saint. Me. That's correct. DDD. Well, this is bull because I don't know where I am. Me. Don't you think as an EMT you'd be expected to know how to map yourself into situations? DDD. No. That's why we have GPS. Me. Not all of our ambulances have GPS. DDD. Well then I'll use my phone. Me. How's that working out for you? Click. About 30 minutes later, DDD comes stomping in, looking sweaty and frustrated. I greet her in the lobby. Me. Hi, welcome to Dumb Bum Ambulance. Can I help you? DDD. I had an appointment an hour ago, but your dispatchers are idiots. They got me lost. Me. Actually, that was me on the phone. DDD. Me. Here at Dumb Bum Ambulance, we hold customer service in high regard. Your attitude on the phone was inappropriate and you have been excused from the interview process. DDD. Oh. Leaves? Goodness. Call an undertaker, because she just put herself in that hole there. I was the hiring manager at a major grocery retailer. I called a guy to schedule an interview and sent him a confirmation email with the date, time, and our company's logo in the header and along with the address in the signature of the email. Dude shows up 20 minutes late and says sorry I'm late. I went to direct competitor grocery store on the other side of town because I thought that's where the interview was. I'm not sure how he figured it out finally and how he didn't figure it out before leaving the house that morning. Conducted an interview with a teenage boy, which was his first interview for his first job ever. He was just the legal minimum age to start working and was clearly so nervous to the point of being petrified. We always look past that, especially for kids completely fresh to the workforce. Anywho, he's actually going okay for someone so nervous, stammering a lot and tripping up words, but he's doing well, until he starts looking a bit green. He asks if he could excuse himself for a moment to go to the toilet, which we let him. My manager and I just give each other a WTF look when he leaves. But again, it's the poor guy's first ever interview for his first job, and despite all of it he was doing okay until he comes back with his mother. He looks a lot better, but he just smiles and sits down again without saying a word. His mum speaks up. Oh, I'm sorry about boy. He gets quite ill when he's nervous. I hope that doesn't put you off. By this point things are getting odd, but we insist it's fine and we understand. Thinking that's all mum had to say, but nope. She sits right down and says, oh good. I hope then you don't mind if I take over the interview. Like I said, he's quite sick and I think it's best if I answer for him. That was the deal breaker. We gave mum and the kid one last chance and told them it was quite alright and he was doing fine. Mum insisted she stayed. The kid just sat there all smug and happy, and Mummy Dearest answered every single question. We would ask the question directly to the boy, and his mum would lean across and answer for him. Needless to say, he did not get the job. How? Why? I seriously don't understand how these parents think. The candidate listed likes and dislikes on his resume. Under dislikes, my company. When I was a teenager, I worked at a chain pizza restaurant. A guy came in for interview and seemed like a nice guy. He turned around to leave and he had a tattoo of a pot leaf with the word cannabis on his head. That's right, not cannabis, cannabis. No regrets. You guys would be lucky to have me. Google is trying to recruit me too. I wished him the best of luck at his job with Google. I was interviewing a woman for a customer service position. Her cover letter said multiple times that she was great with people. Before sitting down across from me in my office to conduct the interview, she sticks her leg out in my direction and points to a scab on her leg. It is clearly infected and has been picked at. She then proceeds to ask me of my opinion about if it is indeed infected and if she should see a doctor. That sounds like a tip she read in a Cosmo style magazine. If you're going to an interview, make sure to include your interviewer on your ailments. It will make them feel more connected to you and will probably hire you. I've seen people put really inappropriate email addresses on their resumes. It is unprofessional and a few have been offensive. A girl talked about her breasts, her ex-boyfriend stalking her, how she packs heat at all times, even though it's illegal in certain places in our state. How she had a child at 15 and regrets it and the child is taken care of by her mother who refuses to speak to her. How her last job was cleaning up crap at a Burger King and she spoke in graphic detail about cleaning up crap with pennies in it. And how she was fired from that job for some reason. And how she wants to bang our manager for a part-time retail position. I really wish I was making this up. It was the most uncomfortable 10 minutes of my life. Even worse, she seemed to seriously believe that we couldn't hire her because of not enough positions and kept showing up every day. My religion doesn't allow me to physically come in contact with dogs. Hire me. No. I mean, I get it. It's a religious thing. But maybe don't apply at a small animal veterinary hospital. Me. Why'd you move from Florida to Texas? Candidate. There were too many Jews in Florida. This was at the tail end of a very successful interview. We were wrapping up the interview and I was definitely going to hire her before I heard her answer. I shouldn't have laughed, but dang, that's a sucker punch of a line for the end of an interview. Just our unexpected Hitler right out of the blue. I did an interview for a couple of temp call center jobs in my office, providing phone support for our new website. The jobs were usually really desirable because we frequently hired standouts for way better permanent positions, and most candidates were really good, but we had one girl who must have TLDR, ed the job listing or something. She spent easily 3/4 of her time making sure we knew how much she loved doing in-person customer service and just hated to be on the phone all day. Told us a bunch of stories about how miserable she was when her last job had her on phones, really hammering that point home. I honestly believe she had no idea what she'd even applied for. Me, you mentioned on your application that you are a good leader. Could you give me an example of your leadership abilities? Candidate, absolutely. At my last job we hated our chef and I organized the kitchen staff to walk out during the Friday night rush. I mean, that's amazing leadership. He organized everyone to protest at the best possible time for maximum impact. I became the hiring manager for a mom and pop restaurant at 18. I looked really young too. Most people put me at about 16 at the time. At any rate, I'd exchanged some emails with a woman wanting to become a server. I was planning on hiring her as she had lots of experience and seemed really nice. So I scheduled her an in-person interview. Keep in mind that I had never actually seen her in person. So the day of her interview comes and I just happen to be at the hostess station when she arrives. When I greet her, "Hi, welcome to," she cuts me off with what has become one of my favorite instances of self-sabotage I've ever witnessed. "Alright, listen, I'm about to get hired her as a server. So what that means is that you, as a little hostess, are going to sit me with all the big tables and give me all the good regulars or I won't tip you out for crap and I'll make your life a living heck. Got it? Good. Now, run along and tell your hiring manager, RFS 14701, that I'm here." I smiled back sweetly and said, "Actually, I'm RFS 14701. I'm sorry to have you come up here for no reason, but I've already filled all of our open serving positions. You have a nice day. There's no way I'm going to hire someone with that much stupidity and that crappy of an attitude." A guy once confessed that he was a convicted felon for drug trafficking, and that he actually had no experience in the industry we were in. Guy turned out to be the best employee I've ever had, out of around 200 people I've hired. Unbelievable. I used to hire for McDonald's, and typically felons took the job more seriously than others. Probably because of the stigma against them, as we also had criminals that stole from the register. They're not all perfect, but if I ever get into a hiring position again, I wouldn't even bat an eye about felons, unless of course their charges are relevant to the position. Stealing for a retail job. Kind of a weird story with a twist. A woman applied for an artist position at my workplace. We did a lot of game research at the time. During the interview, I asked if we could review her portfolio. She nonchalantly said of course. I flipped through and it was all straight up gang RP manga, tentacle P, all women in various poses, BW to colored drawings. I was taken aback and she seemed pretty unfazed. I cut the interview short and put her at the bottom of the pile. Later that night, I got home and chatted with my wife about our day at work. She asked how the interview process was going. I brought up this woman's portfolio and told her it was unexpected and offensive stuff. A pause filled the room and my wife genuinely asked, "Were they drawn well?" Puzzled, I answered honestly that they were drawn very well despite the subject matter. She replied, "Well, if she can draw well, what does it matter what she draws in her spare time?" The following week we hired her. Several years ago, I was the head of a department at a small company. As such, my boss and I were both present for any hiring interviews conducted for my department. One particular interview stands out in my mind. Halfway through the interview, my boss left for a few minutes to take a phone call. While he was gone, I asked the candidate if she had any questions for me. She immediately tries to pull a besties shtick and asks things like, "Do they block any websites on the computers here? Like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. You can text and use Messenger when he's, my boss, not around, right?" And my personal favorite, How much time do you actually have to spend working? Despite introducing myself, I think she assumed I was an assistant. At the time, I looked quite young for my age. When my boss came back, we politely wrapped up the interview. She did not get a call back. This one was a real train wreck and one of my favorite stories. So I work for a cabinet company. A while back we were looking for an account manager to work on a mix of design and pricing projects. One of the applicants we got was a guy in Canada. Now we are a big company, so I thought it was really weird to get an out of country applicant. We decided to call him for a phone interview out of curiosity and hand his info to HR. As it turned out, his fiancée was living in our city, which is why he applied. HR reports that he seems normal and we schedule an in-person for the next time he is in town. So, we come to the day of the interview. This bit I got from the front desk person, so I didn't witness it personally. Apparently the guy came into the office with his fiancée and told her to wait in the lobby for him. She had driven him, I guess, but she refused to make eye contact with the front desk girl or make conversation with her at all. He gets shown to the interview room and the front desk person lets us know he is there. The interview is conducted by our HR person, the department manager, and me as the office trainer. The three of us walk in with me last in line. He jumps around the two women to shake my hand first and barely acknowledges the other two in the room. So, red flag 1. As the interview proceeds, he begins to do a couple of things. 1. He asks how long it will be before he takes the department manager's job. 2. He begins to bash our product for not being the same as what he is used to. And 3. Starts explaining all the things we will be required to do to sponsor his visa. What is normally a 45-minute interview process took about 15 before we ended it. He kept calling about once a week for 2 months asking when we were going to be starting his visa sponsorship. Man, all of my positive generalizations and stereotypes of Canadians have been dashed. I have had a few interviews with people that put down they have experience with doing something, and then when I asked them about it they didn't know what I was talking about. I am not talking about anything tough either. The one that sticks out to me the most is someone applied for a job with us in IT. They put down they have experience setting up a wired and wireless network. I literally asked, I see you put down on your resume that you have networking experience. What kind of experience do you have? The guy said, honestly, I don't have any networking experience. My co-workers asked a few more questions. At the end he asked what he could have done to leave a better impression. I told him, honestly, don't write something on your resume if you don't know anything about it. He didn't even get to the interview. I found an MP3 of him rapping about killing his boss. Here's an MP3. It functions as both my resume and my criminal record. This definitely isn't the worst ever, but I remember seeing a candidate come in for an interview in a zoot suit. It came out that he was really poor and that's the only suit he had available. He borrowed it, which was super sad. He didn't get the job, but I argued for him so strongly solely because I felt so bad for him for having to wear that suit. I interviewed a man once who showed up in a 1920s style gangster suit. Kinda baggy, pinstripes, matching fedora. He was overqualified, seemed a little socially off, and I hired him. I ran into him outside of work a few times, and he was always wearing some kind of crazy suit. Turns out that was his hobby, vintage dress clothes. Nice guy. Retail manager job interview. Candidate, at my last job I made all my employees count all display sunglasses each shift so that none went missing. Me, what was your shrink rate last year? Candidate, it was so bad that all employees were fired. Me, but what about your daily counts? Candidate, that was so the other employees didn't steal. Me, so who did the stealing? Candidate, I think a customer had a key to the back room and must have come in after hours. Me, sounds like you did the stealing. Awkward silence for 3 minutes while I stared at her until she got up and left. She tried justifying her reasons as she was leaving. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.